What's up, Inner Gangsters? I'm the Comics Kid 2099, and I'm here to talk about an episode of Superman the Animated Series called Tools of the Trade. I'll be spoiling this episode quite a bit, so if you haven't seen it, leave now before you hear some spoilers. Gangsters working for Bruno Mannheim attempt a full-scale armed robbery, but are thwarted by Superman, much to the chagrin of Mannheim, and oddly enough, Dan Turpin of the Metropolis Police Department. Turpin's teed off because every time Superman takes care of some kind of criminal activity, it makes the police look bad. So Turpin attempts to go after Mannheim alone, where he discovers that Mannheim is being supplied alien weaponry by a mysterious man named Kanto. Kanto kidnaps Turpin, and when Superman goes in for the save, he nearly gets killed, but Turpin saves him. Despite this victory, it is a hollow one, as Kanto and Mannheim both escape. Good news for Kanto, not so good for Mannheim, as he is taken to Kanto's homeworld Apokolips, where he meets Kanto's boss Darkseid. Bum bum bum. I remember reading an interview with Mark Millar once where he complained about how much screen time the Metropolis Special Crimes Unit was getting in the Superman comics of the 90s. His argument was that Superman is so powerful, we shouldn't need to see the police solving crimes in his book. And on the one hand, I agree with that sentiment, and the further sentiment that there were several rabbit holes the Superman books of the 90s unnecessarily went down. But on the other hand, as I've mentioned in these reviews before, the people making this show actively tried to depower Superman a little bit, much like how John Byrne did in his relaunch of the Superman books in the mid-1980s. As they mentioned on the commentary track for this very episode, if they made him as powerful as some fans think that he should be, then any given episode would only be about 5 minutes long. Hence, in this episode, Superman seems to struggle lifting a tank, even though he has lifted an airplane in this series before. To paraphrase a certain Vulcan, the needs of the episode outweigh the needs of the series, or something like that. So while Mark Millar might not have liked this episode, I don't know, maybe he loved this episode, but based on the out-of-context comments that he made, I'm going to assume that he wouldn't have liked it. It's entirely understandable that, in the context of a series where Superman is understandably depowered for the purpose of being able to tell more stories, that you would eventually bring in the police as a sort of foil to Superman. But the people behind the show do it in a way that I would have never seen coming. Instead of having the episode be from Superman's perspective, most of the episode is from the perspective of Dan Turpin. Superman is present at all of the big action moments, but Turpin is the guy who goes through the character arc here. In a way, it kind of reminds me of the Batman the Animated Series episode POV, which also came from the perspective of characters who didn't have their names in the title of the series. I think that's a smart direction to go for this episode. I don't think there would have been anything wrong with telling the story from Clark's perspective, but if you're going to introduce some new supporting characters, and you're going to tell the story with a little bit of aggression between Turpin and Superman, it's really bold to tell it from Turpin's side. And it worked. I am totally on Turpin's side in this episode. Sure, we all like Superman, but if I have a job, and some guy who doesn't even work with me keeps getting in the way of me doing my job, and then every reporter in the city makes fun of me because of this guy's actions, and then my boss tells me that I'm going to have to work with this clown, yeah, I would be a little bit mad. The only problem I have with this episode is that it seems Turpin's beef with Superman is resolved way too easily. Not even that it's resolved too easily, but rather it isn't resolved at all. Turpin's mad at Superman, gets kidnapped, Superman comes to the rescue, and when the bad guys are gone, the two are buddies now. I can see how you would change your tune on Superman once you're in a dangerous situation where you need him to rescue you. That same thing happened with Lois Lane in the film Superman Returns. So if you want to go the route of Turpin realizing that Superman really has done a lot of good and has saved many lives that the cops physically would not have been able to have saved, then maybe we could have had a quick 10-second reconciliation at the end of the episode. I get it, it's a 20-minute episode, we don't have time to spell everything out, and Superman telling Angela Chen that Turpin saved his life should be enough. But still, it does seem like Turpin goes a complete 180 pretty abruptly. Maybe I'm just reading too much into it, though. So anyway, I like this episode quite a bit. Not much here to dissect and talk about outside of Turpin's problem with Superman. So that's it for today. I'll be back next weekend to talk about another episode of Superman the Animated Series. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.